Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Retro Warriors, episode 275. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard, Chris Saturn.
Hello.
Saturn, we have housekeeping. First up, as always, you can check the episode description for timestamps to jump to the topic at hand this week. Also, we are announcing a change to our monthly thank you segment that we do for people that listen to the show regularly. You'll know that once a month, we thank all of our patrons by their real legal names on the show. And as our patrons have grown, it has become a bigger and bigger segment, and it's becoming a situation where we feel like we are kind of burying everyone's names because we are trying to get through 130 of them at the time of this recording.
And we end up, flubbing some and missing some and just trying to barrel through them all.
So in the interest of giving patrons' names room to breathe so that we can really individually thank them, we're going to be reading patron names every single episode.
Right.
So at the end of every episode, we are going to thank a handful of patrons.
All 100 and some odd people.
A handful of patrons every week. They will be different every week. They're randomly selected.
Right.
So if you are one of our patrons that likes to legally change your name so that you can put a different name on our Patreon to make us read something else, then your cue to do so will be after you hear your name read on the show.
Right.
That means it's been read and you can safely go change it, and it'll go back in the pool whenever we've been through all the names and they reset.
Right.
We've also got it set up such that as new patrons are added, they will also go into the random pool. So if you add your name, you don't have to wait till we get through all of them to start back over so that you'll be included. It is random and it's updated every time we record.
Right.
So all of that said, let's get into it. My week, I raised 10 Digimons.
Oh, boy.
So you may not know this, Saturn, because you're not a virtual pet aficionado, I am.
Okay.
You just immediately sound so critical. Okay, yeah. I feel like I'm explaining Pokemon to my grandma right now.
Right.
So a new wave of them come out, and certain colors have certain exclusive Digimon on them, as things like this tend to do, right? And I now have one from every unique set. And to unlock some of the exclusives, you have to connect them to certain other exclusives. Now, the thing about virtual pets is that to connect them, you have to raise them until they're old enough that they can connect to another Digimon. This is something that I guess Bandai thinks people do in the real world with all their friends that have Digimon virtual pets. But in practice, it's just me by myself buying 6 different Digimons because I like them.
That's how my mom played Pokemon.
See, there you go.
She would just buy all the different colors and multiple games.
Trade them back and forth.
And trade them to herself.
And basically, I've done the virtual pet version of that. And I had to raise all 6 devices at once so that they could all be active at the same time to connect all to one another to unlock all of the exclusives that it could unlock. And so this whole week has been me raising 6 different Digimon devices. And eventually it all got unlocked and I let most of them die and put them all back in the boxes. And I'm down to my one daily driver, Digimon. But along the way, I spent a lot of time this last week raising Digimons to accomplish that. And I got to say, I feel very accomplished.
Do you?
Yes, I do. I feel great. I feel great about it. So I feel better than I have in years. Okay. So don't ask, as I feel great. I did also, because I was in raising them, they have different, you have to treat them differently to get different Digimon, right? It's not like Pokemon where it can only turn into this thing. It's like, oh, if you treat it good, it's this one. If you treat it bad, it's this one, and it branches. So I was reading a lot about them all week, making sure I had all the requirements right to unlock all the stuff that I needed.
Okay.
Because of that, I was very invested in Digimon this week, and I was like, man, I should go try to play Cyber Sleuth again, because that's a Digimon game, and everyone's like, this is the best Digimon game in years, and I'm just going to keep saying Digimon until it loses all real meaning.
That was a long time ago.
And so I did, and I still do not like the game.
That's unfortunate.
It's just, I'm like, the actual monster part is cool. It's like, raise these awesome giant dinosaurs that shoot missiles and laser beams at each other, and that's fun. I like that. Yeah. But then it's like, hang out in a mall and talk to people about school. I don't like that.
Yeah.
It's a little too Persona-y for me, I guess.
Weird. That feels like a weird mix of games.
It does.
Yeah.
But when you remember that since the anime, Digimon's kind of been a thing geared toward, school-age children, it makes, I guess what I'm saying is it makes sense from a marketing perspective.
Never seen any of the anime either, so I have no idea.
It's pretty much targeted at I would say Digimon targets a slightly older demographic than Pokemon. I feel like Pokemon tries to be really acceptable to very young children, a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old would be excited about Pokemon. I feel like Digimon's shooting for that 9 to 12-year-old range.
I got the opposite impression when I worked at a game store because the people coming in to buy Pokemon were generally older teenagers and 20-somethings. And the people coming in to get Digimon were people young enough that they didn't realize they were being sold an imitation product.
Right. Well, specifically what I mean is who the company seems to think they're marketing toward.
Right.
Right? Because Pokemon just pretends that they don't think that a huge amount of their fan base is like people in their 30s. They pretend that they think all of their fan base is very small children.
Right.
And that's what they seem to mostly market
Are
toward.
they still doing that?
I feel like they've lightened up on it a little bit in recent years, but it's still very young kid friendly.
Yeah, I guess so.
It very much does. The stories do not get very dark.
Right.
It's pretty.
There's a couple of risque
there's
jokes
some moments
here and there.
Yeah, but for the most part, it's very, very young kid friendly.
Yeah, that's fair.
Digimon has always been a little bit more like angels and demons and dinosaurs shooting rockets and laser beams and machine guns. A little more like, again, that 9 to 12-year-old range kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm in the weeds now.
Yeah, I know nothing about any of this. I'm just listening to you talk.
Anyway, so it's I still don't love the game because I like the Digimon are cool. It's like this weird cross between like Pokemon and Gundams and Kaiju. Like that's cool to me conceptually, but then it wants me to care about teenagers, and I'm like, I don't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, teenagers. I don't care what you have going on in your life. It's not interesting to me.
I feel so bad when your child becomes a teenager and you just
I'm gonna be like,
I don't care what you're doing anymore.
I'm gonna be like, sorry, sweetie, I'm not interested in your life. It's very boring to me. I just want you to know I'm so bored with you.
Can you go back a few years?
I just, I think a lot of it is because I did not like my teenage years, and so I don't care to even watch others live them. I'm just over them.
That's rough.
I also got my Tetris mini keychain in the mail,
which we'll talk about more in the news as well.
Right, and it's fun. Yeah. It's definitely. It is more complex and engaging than like a Tiger handheld.
Right.
But not quite as complex and engaging as actual Tetris.
Now, so everything that I've seen of it, all the pictures of it I've seen and everything, make it look identical to the one from the 90s.
Now, I've not played the one from the 90s, so I couldn't speak to that. I believe it is.
Yeah.
It has 3 different modes.
Yeah, like every picture I've seen of the screen in action of like the mode select and all that looks literally identical to the one that I have.
It probably is. I would not be shocked at all.
I'm excited by that idea because I played the shit out of that back in the 90s.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's fun. I don't know. Like I ordered it from Amazon Japan, and I think tax and shipping altogether it was like $27.
You can still get the old one for $15 on eBay.
Yeah, I would if I had paid the $15 range, I'd probably be a little more excited. But it's fun. I've been keeping it in my pocket next to my Digimon and
like you do
playing Tetris on my keychain.
Yeah,
so it's
I had
a good
it
time.
on my keys throughout high school, and anytime that I finished up early in a class, if I didn't have anything else going on and I hadn't brought my Game Boy, I would just pull that out and play a couple rounds of Tetris. And the worst thing in the world was when I didn't realize that the sound had turned itself back on.
Yeah, because every time you reset, it turns the sound back on.
Yeah. Which I didn't reset very often, but every now and then, like the sound button would get hit in my pocket, and then worse is when the new game would also get hit in my pocket, and I'd be in the middle of taking a test, and you'd hear do 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 do, like
now
super
this
loud.
one This one, I don't know if it's different, but you have to hold the power button for like a good 3 or 4 seconds for it to go on or off.
Well, that one didn't have rechargeable batteries.
Okay.
It was just watch batteries, and it lasted.
This
like
one's
a year.
USB-C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't have to replace its batteries for like a year. Its screen would go black or blank after a moment or two of inactivity, and then
so
any
just
button
stays
would turn
on.
it back on. It was fun. I used that thing a ton.
Yeah, it's neat. Yeah. As someone who's for some reason very into keychain electronics, apparently, I guess I should own it. I'm really into keychain electronics.
And in middle school, I had gotten several little keychains as a gift, and my mother randomly decided that meant I was collecting keychains now. And since both she and my father and many other people in our family were borderline hoarder collectors, she was like, we need to get you more keychains. And so anywhere we were at, if there was a new kind of keychain, we would get it, to the point to where it ended up being like 15 feet long, this novelty keychain that we had put together. And we had little tiny keychain miniature versions of like Clue and Trouble and all these like classic generic ass board games. And somebody found one that was Twister, and you open it up, and instead of there being a Twister board in there, it's just got the little dial and then just some vinyl dots, and it's just like, put them on the floor and about the same spacing as a Twister board.
I don't know why my first thought was that you would unfold it and it was a tiny Twister board and you do it with your fingers.
Right. Yeah, no, that would make more sense.
Anyway, other than playing with keychains, that's about all I've been up to this week. It feels sad saying that.
Yeah,
but it's true.
A little, yeah. I went on a Game Pass binge this week because I was trying to rack up Microsoft points, because they're doing this thing this month, which will probably be either expired or close to expired by the time this goes live. But any gamer score you get, any achievements you get this month, just get applied 1-to-1 to your Microsoft Rewards points.
Yeah,
and Game Pass Ultimate is only like 35,000 Microsoft Rewards points, so I'm pretty close to getting another 3 months of that, just for free from playing games. And so I was just digging through some games just to see what I might or might not like. So first I re-downloaded Guacamelee 2, which I already played, so I knew it was good, and so I played a little bit, but then I moved on. And then I started replaying The Messenger, which I probably mentioned a long time ago. I had tried to play, and then it glitched out on me, and I couldn't finish the game because of it.
Right.
Well, this time I just played through the entire fucking thing, beginning to end, and it was excellent.
It's a long one too. It's not.
It's like 8 or 9 hours, maybe.
I should rephrase. It's a lot longer than I thought it was going to be.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was going to be like 2 or 3 hour little indie game. Yeah. It's an ordeal.
I remember when you had first started playing it, and you were talking about how you thought you were near the end and you thought it was pretty good. And then I mentioned the 16-bit mode, and you were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, it's in the trailers.
I had not watched them.
Yeah, when you get near the end of the 8-bit section in the game, if you talk to the shopkeeper and just go through all of his flavor text, your character says, I think I'm reaching the end. I think I'm about to get to where we're going. And the shopkeeper will reply to you with, you didn't watch the trailer, did you? So I appreciate that. Also, I played some Indivisible, which was by Lab Zero before they dissolved. And it is excellent. Like, I didn't know exactly what I was getting out of it. I had heard it was kind of a JRPG, but with a 2D fighting game battle system. And that's not quite accurate, but it's close to what it is.
Yeah.
And it's neat. Each character is assigned a button, and you can hold a direction and press a button to do moves with them during battle. And so it is a much more active battle system than a standard JRPG, but it's not quite a fighting game. I wouldn't call it that.
Right.
The voice acting's terrible though. So it's got that going for it. Tried some Don't Starve. I did not get into that at all. It's just a survival game.
I had avoided it for so long because of the art style. Kind of turned me off.
Actually, I like the art style. I dislike the gameplay. That's it's not my kind of game.
Yeah.
I tried Human Fall Flat because it had a special reward attached to it. It's like a physics sim puzzle game, and I never want to touch that again. That was Oh man, that was not my game. I retried Minute, which I still can't figure out what the hell I'm doing in it, so I'm not getting
Right.
any further.
Well, you only got to do it for a minute, so.
Yeah, you only got to
You'll
go
be
for a minute till you die, and then you start over. And supposedly you can carry something between lives, but haven't figured out what, so I just keep reliving the same life over and over.
Yeah.
I tried Wander Song, which was really good. It's kind of a 2D platformer. It's weird. There's a lot of singing involved.
It's a game.
Yes.
You can play it.
It's fun. I recommend at least checking out a video. And I tried Moonlighter, which is kind of a combination roguelite, kind of in the Zelda 1 dungeon style, mixed with a city simulator where you build up a town and start stores and stuff.
See, I had seen it, and I just assumed it was your standard indie roguelike and just ignored it entirely.
Right. And I hear as you get further, it gets more difficult and possibly more obnoxious, and I'm worried about hitting that point. But where I am right now, I'm just redoing the same dungeon over and over again to just collect money and make my town as big as I can. And,
Right.
And I enjoy city simulators, so that's working great for me.
Well, good. Let's knock out some news. First up, Tetris Mini Keychain announced and subsequently released. It's available on Amazon Japan. No word on a U.S. release.
Or any international release.
Yeah. But,
it's Amazon.
keychain games are getting real big right now, so maybe it will. I don't know. Well, I'll say this. Bandai keeps releasing Digimon waves over here, so obviously they're selling.
It's getting real big in your house anyway.
It is. It's turning into a pile in my house is what it's...
How much of the Western Digimon market do you think you personally are responsible for?
At
least 12%?
Basically none. It's they've never stopped making them since 1997.
It's crazy.
There was a little bit of a break for a few years, but it's a bigger thing than you would imagine it is. That's all I'll say.
Huh.
I'm in some Discord communities. It's a lot bigger than I thought it was. I went on the internet and I was like, I like virtual pets, and the whole internet was like, we do too. And I was like, really? It's like when you have a friend that you've had for years, then all of a sudden you're like, such and such is my favorite movie, and they're like, oh my God, mine too. I didn't know that you liked it. That's how I'm feeling with the internet right now. Is that
you found that side of the internet?
Yeah. U.S. Department of Justice arrests 2 members of Switch hacking group Team Executor.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Well, they were trying to sell it.
That's true.
Yeah.
And it is illegal. Kids, don't sell your hacks or your exploits.
Yeah. They were trying to sell the hacks. They were trying to sell the pirated software. I mean, they kind of put their hand in it.
Yeah. UK Parliament calls for feedback regarding loot box regulation. What does that mean, feedback?
They're
so
looking
asking
for
the public or the companies?
Public. They're looking, and they said internationally too. They don't care if it's just the UK or not. They just want, I don't know if they're still doing it at this point, but they were looking for feedback as far as personal experiences with loot boxes, how they have made you feel, if they have led you to making bad decisions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yeah.
Terra Onion announces PS1 support for the Mode. This is an optical drive emulator for the Sega Saturn. You put it inside of your Saturn. So I guess if you want to disassemble your Saturn,
Dreamcast.
Yeah, Saturn or Dreamcast. That's correct. So I guess if you want to disassemble your Saturn or Dreamcast and put it in your PlayStation, it'll work feasibly.
Yeah.
Or if you wanted to take all the guts out of all
something.
3 and make some sort of giant monster system, then that might work too.
Good luck.
Sony makes X the universal confirm button on the PS5, ditching the 25-year-old standard in Japan of circle being the confirm button, and cross being the cancel or go back button.
Right. Which in Japanese culture is not just a PlayStation thing. Circle is always the okay sign there, and cross is always the no sign there. So that's going to be very confusing over there.
Yeah, it sucks for them. We won't really notice it stateside. We'll just wonder why, if they ever make a Metal Gear game again, it's backward.
Yeah.
Because to me, that wasn't the Japanese way. That was the Metal Gear way. And I was like, that's weird that Metal Gear is backwards.
For me, it was the normal way because early PS1 games all had circle as enter and X as cancel. And then there was that weird in-between era where they hadn't figured out what they wanted the international buttons to be. And they had X as enter and triangle as cancel. And that was weird. And I'm glad that ended quickly. But yeah, like Final Fantasy VII had circle as enter. Resident Evil 1 had circle as enter. It was just, that was standard.
Capcom removes Denuvo from Resident Evil 3 on Steam.
Good for them.
Good.
Yeah.
New Dragon Quest anime, The Adventure of Dai, premiered worldwide via streaming.
And I think it's on
have not
TV
watched
in
it.
Japan too, but
Yeah,
internationally,
I assume it's on Crunchyroll here.
Crunchyroll and Hulu in the US and other services throughout the rest of the world.
I actually know nothing about it. Is this like a kid-centric anime, or is this just
it's
like
based on the
like,
manga, so it's kid friendly. But
Okay.
it does have various Dragon Questy things. I haven't watched any of it yet either.
Activision Blizzard to shut French office. French Blizzard employees go on strike in protest.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Thanks, Activision.
Yeah,
Hackers found a way to cheat in Super Mario 35 immediately.
surprising no one.
Absolutely not.
No.
Sega hints at a possible Dreamcast Mini, which
I'm okay with
I
it.
don't.
I'm down.
I'm okay with it. I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
But I'm okay. Like, I don't see it happening in the same form that the Genesis Mini happened.
No, probably not.
You know, I see it being like,
My question would be, what would they do with
I don't know.
VMUs?
I assume that your controller would just have a little screen built into it.
Right, but what about the VMU mini games?
I assume they would not be available.
That's weak.
And to be fair, there's not a lot of VMU mini games that I'd really be heartbroken to not have.
Yeah, and even then, they could just show them on the screen when you're not playing the game if you really wanted.
Yeah, I either that or if they do the VMU thing, it's going to be a separate accessory because they've shown before that they are happy to release accessories for their mini
That's
consoles.
true.
The Genesis Mini had multiple little
Sega CD
doodads
stuff.
and accessories and licensed things. So
That's
I
true.
could see them being like, here's the thing, then here's the VMU separately, you know, for like $19.99 or something. But Dreamcast Mini, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
We'll see. I don't know how they'd get the price point down because Dreamcast requires a decent amount of horsepower.
They would just include no games, but have an authentic Dreamcast modem, so that you could connect it online and buy the games.
They could just put a disk drive in there and just basically make it a regular Dreamcast, and we can burn games
It's
for
already
it.
pretty tiny.
Problem solved. GameStop and Microsoft announce a strategic partnership that will give GameStop a cut of digital sales on any Xboxes sold via the retailer.
That's how GameStop
Which-
stays alive.
That's how they do it.
Yeah.
That's how they do it. But
and
you know what?
gasp,
If it's
GameStop
it's
is pushing more Xboxes now.
Yeah, if this were the other way around and Sony was doing this,
Yeah.
I'd be upset. But because it's Microsoft, I don't care because Microsoft's pretty okay right now. So,
Yeah.
in my opinion, fuck you, Sony. PS3, PSP, and PS Vita games will no longer be accessible via the PlayStation Store's web or mobile interfaces as of late October 2020.
Speaking
Now,
of fuck you, Sony.
you can still access PS3 and PS Vita games on the systems themselves because they can still open the PlayStation
Kind
Store.
of.
Yeah, in a way.
Because the Vita, several games don't show up on its store.
True.
And you
Now the PSP, you can't access the games at all now except on a PS3.
You have
I
to use a
guess, is the
PS3,
only
or
way?
you could download them on a PS Vita directly, but you wouldn't be able to copy them to your PSP anymore.
So basically, if you don't own a PS3, you can't download digital PSP games at all now.
Correct. And you also can't get certain PS Vita games without a PS3 because they don't show up on the PS Vita store, but they will show up on the PS3, and then you can copy them to your Vita.
I'm so glad that Sony is so inept that their entire server structure is busted wide open and people can pirate whatever they want out of it
Yes.
because fuck you.
Yeah, seriously.
PS5 backward compatibility list only shows 10 PS4 games that do not work on the PS5. So that's good.
news, yeah.
I didn't look at the list of the 10, but
the
I
only
assume
one
it's
that I
nothing
recognized at all was Hitman Go,
major.
which is the mobile spin-off of Hitman, which
Right.
was ported to PS4. Everything else were, and I'm sure there are people that enjoy those games, but it was nothing that I personally recognized.
Yeah. 505 Games announced that all future work on Indivisible, including previously announced backer rewards, has been canceled. Upcoming cameo characters have also been canceled after an IP holder pulled out of supporting the game. The upcoming physical Switch release will continue, but in very limited supply.
Having just started to enjoy the game this week, this is extra frustrating.
Yeah. I've been hearing you go on about Indivisible
Yeah.
and how upset you are.
Yeah, I'm not happy about this. Well, that's also just because of that jerk at Lab Zero and all of his horribleness that we have previously mentioned.
Yeah, that guy can get bent.
Right.
Anyway, let's get into the topic at hand. This week we're talking Resident Evil 4, aka Biohazard 4 in Japan.
I believe that the cover of the game calls it For Resident Evil.
Oh, pardon me, 4 Resident Evil Village.
Yeah.
Is what we're covering, because this is our Halloween episode.
That's true. This is Halloween.
It's going to be going up near Halloween.
Yes.
Yes, welcome to our very spooky episode. I scared you by talking about Digimon and telling you that you can't download PSP games anymore, and now
That's
I'm
all
going to
right.
scare you.
We scared you in the pre-show by talking about sitcom theme songs somehow. So it's
Yeah, that's
okay.
true. That's also true. Just our spooktacular spook episode
That's
where
right.
it's real spooky. You may recognize Resident Evil 4 as the fourth entry in Capcom's long-running Resident Evil series that was a GameCube exclusive.
Briefly.
Saturn, it was exclusively on the GameCube.
For like 6 months.
Exclusive.
Also,
they
it's
said
the
it.
12th game in the Resident Evil series.
They said at E3 that I had to own a GameCube to play Resident Evil 4, so I bought one.
No, my favorite part, I think I even put it in the notes in here somewhere, that Shinji Mikami's comment about GameCube exclusivity. Yeah, here it is. Resident Evil 4 will definitely release only on GameCube. If it comes to another console, I will cut my head off.
Oh, wow.
That is-
so
that
I
is
have
what
to eat my PC Engine, but not before he cuts his own head
Right,
off.
that was what Shinji Mikami said at E3 in 2002.
You know what? Now I'm upset all over again that it came to other stuff, because that's really dumb. If someone's like, I will literally cut my head off, that's really doubling down on
Yeah.
something.
Granted, that was 3 years before release.
How would you even cut your? You'd have
You'd
to
have
have
to have
some
a
sort of mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't just start hacking away.
You're
You'd
not
need
going to use a pair of Fisker scissors on that one. that ain't gonna do it.
Yeah, you're not going to get in there with a kitchen knife.
No.
You'd need. Let's do some listener feedback. This got dark and weird fast. Elk Neodaps
Happy
writes in,
Halloween.
Resident Evil 4 was completely directionless during most of its development, and it shows. I can appreciate what it did for the medium, ushering in an era of grays and browns that would flood the market for bro games for the next decade and beyond.
Not wrong.
And who doesn't love awkwardly manipulating the C-stick to aim? What an absolute classic. Perfect in every way. Truly the Citizen Kane of completely good and not bad shooting games.
Perfect.
CW Tide Fan writes in, I remember playing through RE4 once. I did enjoy it, but my best memory was taking my PS2 to my buddy's house, and we decided to let him borrow it. He likes the Call of Duty type games, so I told him he might like this one. He later told me that he only played once or twice, and both times he had to watch cartoons before bed to prevent the nightmares. Robbie writes in, who else got legitimately disturbed the first time they got killed by the chainsaw guy? Me, I did, and every subsequent time. I remember this game as being the first palatable escort mission. I don't know that I'd agree with palatable. And I also remember wanting to grab my GameCube by the stupid handle and hurl it out the door at the knife fight with Krauser before the damn QuickTime prompts
Jesus, God,
would be
yeah.
just a fraction too fast for even my 20-something reflexes to handle.
Yep.
I agree with you there. But I did love how much ammo they'd throw at you. 5 out of 7. Perfect
Good.
score.
That is a
Cool
perfect
Hand
score.
Standman writes in, Resident Evil 4 is the reason why replaying any of the previous titles is so difficult. Regardless of the scope of the game, whether it is horror, action, or some new genre altogether, the over-the-shoulder view for shooting and aiming was a monumental shift. There are also some very eerie and scary moments. My biggest complaint of the game is how incredibly dark portions of it are visually. Finally, Tamachain87 writes in, RE4 isn't a good Resident Evil game.
I agree.
Don't get me wrong, it's a decent enough action-adventure game, but as a Resident Evil game, it falls short. The past 3 Resident Evils all take place in semi-realism. Resident Evil 4 takes these ideas, bundles them up neatly into a nice package, and punts them directly off the nearest cliff. Leon S. Kennedy returns to roundhouse kick and suplex mobs of Spanish farmers who instantly melt into giant pillars of colorful light to indicate item pickups.
That is true. All of that is accurate.
I will already say that I am taken aback at the amount of flack RE4 seems to get now, because at the time, everyone I knew was like, this is the greatest thing ever. I didn't like any of those other dumb Resident Evils. This one's the good one. So that was the popular opinion among people I knew.
We'll get into it in a little bit.
Right, obviously.
I would say that it was definitely critically acclaimed, but it is a very divisive game among Resident Evil and horror fans.
Yeah. Release info came out on the GameCube in North America on January 11th, 2005, in Japan on the GameCube in January 27th of 2005, and in PAL territories on the GameCube March 18th, 2005, March 24th in Australia. On the PS2, it came out in North America October 25th, 2005. In PAL territories, it was November 4th, 2005, and in Japan, it was December 1st of 2005. And obviously it was later ported to PC, Wii, whatever the hell a Zeebo is, Android, iOS, Xbox 360, PS3, PS4, Xbox One, PC again, and Nintendo Switch.
Correct.
So it was double ported to PC.
Yeah.
That's how much we wanted it.
The first PC port was done by Ubisoft, and it's garbage. It's just terrible. Like, even when it came out, it was bad because it didn't support most controllers, and it also didn't support mouse aiming. So you had to use your keyboard to move and aim. And it was not good.
I will say I was very excited for Resident Evil 4 at launch. This was the first time that I watched E3 coverage. And I remember seeing it and watching the QuickTime event set, because at E3 they showed a QuickTime event segment of him fighting the El Gigante or whatever, and running from a boulder.
Yeah.
And those two scenes, I was like, I gotta have this. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And I got it and I played it. I would like put my comforter over the window to make it real dark and extra spooky. And I played a lot of it. I could never beat it. Because, we'll talk about this more probably, but I find the game tremendously, obscenely difficult. And for my playthrough for the show, I had to quit because I couldn't beat it. And I don't mean it gets hard. I mean, from the very first moment, it is a very difficult game for me. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong. I don't know if it just doesn't click with me. I don't know. It is very hard for me.
If you try to play it as a shooter game instead of as a survival game, it definitely gets very difficult because you're constantly out of ammunition and health, and you're just struggling. But if you play it as a survival game where you are constantly on the defensive and hoarding ammunition, it's not as difficult.
I mean, I do my best to conserve, and it's not ever even an ammunition issue. I usually, I might run out of ammo for a specific weapon, but I'm never like, oh no, I have no ammo at all. I'm out of ammo. It's never that. It's just, we'll talk more in the gameplay segment. But all that to say that I loved the game when it came out. I played it obsessively when it came out, and I have struggled since then to enjoy it.
I was super stoked for it before it came out. I was already a big fan of the series, and I was still working in a game store at the time, and I had sold a shit ton of GameCubes based on Resident Evil. Like, I kept telling people, if you want horror games, you're going to buy a GameCube because Resident Evil and Eternal Darkness. And and I sold a bunch of RE1 and RE0 and the 2 and 3 and Code Veronica remakes on GameCube. And so I had a lot of people excited about Resident Evil 4. When it came out, a friend of mine didn't have a GameCube yet, but he did have a 70-inch HD TV. So I brought my GameCube to his
So here's
house.
your best friend,
right?
Out of nowhere, suddenly.
He was also a big Resident Evil fan too, so he was super stoked about it, and he had to wait till the PlayStation version. So instead, I brought my GameCube to his house. We plugged it into his big TV. We put in the stretch mode so that there wouldn't be the letterboxing.
Right.
And we just passed the controller back and forth for weeks until we ended up finishing it, and just we enjoyed it so much we ended up playing it 3 times back to back. and I have never finished it since, no matter how many times I've tried.
But not due to difficulty, just disinterest.
Just I kind of lose interest halfway through the beginning. I'm like, well, I remember how this starts now. I don't need to.
Saturn, tell me about the development of Resident Evil 4.
So it's the earliest of what you can call Resident Evil 4's development was at I believe it was at E3 of 1999 when Shinji Mikami, who was the director of Resident Evil 1, and he was the producer of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, he announced there would be a new Resident Evil game in development for the upcoming PlayStation 2. And that was in 1999, 6 years before the game came out. So clearly it was a perfect development schedule.
Right.
The fan community, and I think Capcom themselves, have broken it down to 5 different versions of the game.
Oh my goodness.
So version 1, the original Resident Evil 4-ish, was being directed by the director of Resident Evil 2, who's Hideki Kamiya, who you might also recognize from Bayonetta and Wonderful 101 and all that stuff. So he wanted to make something that was more cool and stylish than a traditional Resident Evil. And so he made the protagonist an invincible person named Tony, who was smarter and more skilled than most people due to some generic Resident Evil biotech.
Invincible.
Invincible. An invincible man. That's how he was described.
Okay, then.
Yeah,
well.
and then they kept trying to make it work within the Resident Evil world, and it was not. And so eventually Tony became Dante, and Resident Evil 4 became Devil May Cry.
Yeah.
So that was version 1. It is no longer Resident Evil. Let's move on. And they went on. They brought in Hiroshi Shibata, who had been the lead of pre-rendered background design for Resident Evil 3.
That is such a late 90s job description.
Right.
That's like lead FMV director.
Right. So he was the new director for the game.
Yeah.
And this was the first version that was announced as a GameCube exclusive as part of the Capcom 5. Fans call this one the fog version because there was fog everywhere. And the few clips that we saw of it, it appeared to be about Leon infiltrating Umbrella's European headquarters, but also it's a castle for some reason, and also he's infected with the progenitor virus.
So some of this remained in the game.
Some of this heavily influenced what became the game, but it's not quite what it ended up being. Leon is there.
Okay.
We've gotten that far.
Leon's there. There's a castle.
Yes.
He's injected with a thing.
Yes, that much is
that's all pretty close.
It did have some first-person elements, but it appeared to still retain the third-person view from previous Resident Evil games. And it still had regular zombies in it at this point. So it wasn't super far along. And then at E3 2003, they showed off what is now called version 3, which is called the Hookman version. Capcom officially calls it Maboroshi no Biohazard 4, or the Phantom Biohazard 4.
Oh.
It is closer to the final version. It had an early version of the over-the-shoulder aiming, but the story was supposed to be much scarier than the final game. If I remember right, this is when Mikami proudly said at E3, this game will make you pee your pants.
Oh, wow. So he's really into the self-mutilation and the pissing here. He's just all over the place.
He might have said shit your pants. I think he said pee your pants, though. I don't remember. But either way, he wanted somebody to need new pants because of the game.
Right. And he would put his own head on the line to make it happen.
Yeah, this was a year after he put his own head on the line, too. So he was very dedicated to what this game would eventually be.
Yeah.
And in that version of the game, Leon still had some kind of disease, but it wasn't sure if it was progenitor or what would become the disease in the final game. There were ghosts, there was haunted armor, there was a living doll, and there was a ghost man with a big butcher hook that would chase you. And then that version went away, and there was apparently a version 4, which I don't think was ever shown to the public, and it was called the hallucination version. Some people argue whether or not it ever even went beyond storyboard. And it was Leon infiltrating the Spencer Mansion, whether or not it was the Resident Evil 1 Spencer Mansion or the Code Veronica Spencer Mansion or some other mansion that the Spencer family owned somewhere in the fucking world.
Mhm.
And also it was connected to a castle somehow. And also there was zombies. And that one was canceled for feeling too formulaic. And I can understand why.
Yeah.
And then finally is the version that actually was released. Mikami himself took over the director's chair from Hibata. He wanted to reinvent the series because after the release of Resident Evil Zero, he felt that the series was becoming too stale. He may have had a point. As much as I love the earlier games, I can get where they're coming from there. Mikami said he was inspired by the gameplay of Onimusha 3, but thought that the game would feel better if the camera were behind the player character. Now, he said this specifically in relation to the version that he directed, despite the fact that older versions already had an over-the-shoulder camera.
Yeah.
So I think he was just taking credit for other people's work at that point.
Yeah, basically, it's what it sounds like. And it's interesting that Onimusha 3 inspired him, because Onimusha is I don't know that it's remembered this way, but at the time, it felt kind of, it's very horror-y.
Oh, yeah. When the first one came out, it was definitely seen as Samurai Resident Evil. Just not quite as dark. And by Onimusha 3, it was pretty much just an action franchise. But
right.
But yeah, they did have the new gameplay style. They also decided to ditch zombies. They didn't want to focus on Umbrella. They wanted all the characters' designs to be updated. Specifically, Mikami wanted Leon to look more cool in the final game.
What happened to that decision? Why did it never go through? Because he looks like a doofus.
Everyone I knew thought that Leon looked like the coolest son of a bitch when that game came out.
Oh, man.
Like, I knew guys who bought that stupid fucking jacket after that game came out.
He feels like he's like one bad dye job away from being a Dragon Ball Z character sometimes.
I knew somebody who had that haircut, too, after that game came out.
Me, too. His name was Trunks. He was in Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. So now I see why they re-released the game so many times. They had to make it 5 times, so they want to get their money back.
Right. Well,
they have to sell it 5 times worth of games.
Yeah, they spent over 5 years in development. I get why it it needed to hit some goals.
What I don't understand about Resident Evil to this day is why they feel a constant need to reinvent these games when they seemed relatively well beloved up through 3 and Code Veronica.
Well,
and then they were like, we need to constantly nonstop reinvent every title. Bam, 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 bam.
Well, here's the thing about horror games that fans like myself of horror games don't like to admit, but eventually we have to, is that there's a very small audience for horror games. And
I suppose that's true.
As the budget gets bigger on these games, they need to sell more, and they can't sell them just to me. They need to sell them to everyone. So they have to find some way to pitch them to everyone.
How many times have you bought Resident Evil 4?
Let's not talk about that.
Is it at least in the single digits?
It is in the single digits. Oh, wait.
All right.
Hold on.
Excellent.
Let me double.
No, don't think. Just say yes and move on.
It's probably in the single digits. Let's say that.
That's good enough for me. Let's jump into the story.
Okay.
And I'm just going to go through it real quick for us.
In brief. Story, yeah.
Leon S. Kennedy, I keep thinking Bill S. Preston every time I read that name.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Now I want to see Leon and Keanu hook up and go back in time.
Leon S. Kennedy, Esquire, then rookie cop, introduced in Resident Evil 2, and one of the only survivors from the infection and destruction of Raccoon City, has been hired by the U.S. government as a special agent. His mission is to rescue Ashley Graham, the daughter of the president, who is kidnapped by a cult in Spain.
I have so many questions already.
I had to trim our listener write-ins down because they were so long, but someone did basically say that they just stole the story of bad dudes and made it into Resident Evil.
So here's among my many problems with this story already.
This is the first paragraph of the story section,
I know.
Saturn. We're at the beginning.
So one, how did the daughter's president manage to get kidnapped by a cult and it's not the biggest story internationally? 2,
I don't know.
How is it that Leon is tasked with defending the president and his family, but is not a member of the Secret Service?
Right. And tasked to do it alone
Yeah.
completely with
Right.
one pistol.
Yeah. Why isn't SEAL Team 6 sent in for this?
I think we've discovered is that the president really didn't want his daughter back. So they're like, what if we get that one guy that inevitably has severe PTSD from going through a horrible viral epidemic? We give him one gun and we drop him out of a helicopter into rural Spain.
Right. Perfect.
Do we think that at least seems like we tried enough that we cannot actually try?
I think also what we learned here is that Shinji Mikami has no idea how reality works.
Upon arrival in Spain, Leon S. Kennedy Esquire encounters an unnamed village where all of the residents are members of Los Illuminados, which is a cult.
Yes.
After meeting Luis, a researcher who is studying Los Illuminados,
And a sexist.
Leon learns... Do what?
And he's also a sexist. He is a researcher and a sexist.
Yeah, he's a little heavy-handed with that.
Mhm.
Leon learns that the cult controls their members via a parasite known as Las Plagas. Shortly thereafter, Leon is injected with the parasite.
Yes.
Despite
Good job,
this,
Leon.
he continues on his mission to save Ashley and finds that she's been held in a church. While escaping with Ashley, he meets Osmond Sadler, the head of Los Illuminados, who informs them of the Plagas inside of them. When attempting to escape, Leon learns that the helicopter has been shot down, and the American government only has one helicopter.
No, they're
so
sending
he and
another.
Ashley,
They've got another one on the way any minute now.
yeah, any second it'll be here. So he and Ashley take out some more villagers and El Gigantes in order to hide out in a castle where it's definitely safe. Big spooky castle.
Yeah, totally safe there.
Don't go back to the village that you've already murdered everyone in that has nobody in it. Go
Right.
to this new location.
Yes, that's important.
Ashley starts coughing up blood and runs off again for some reason. And while looking for her, he encounters a... Go ahead.
The whole scene where she coughs up blood and he looks at her and he's clearly saying, "Are you okay?" or something along those lines, and she
Yeah.
gets super offended and is like, "Don't look at me! Don't touch me!" and just runs away from him for no reason. And just walks right into an obvious trap. That
Yeah.
whole scene pisses me off.
Her character pisses me off.
Yeah, that too.
And so does Leon's. Actually, so does every character in this game, come to think of it. While looking for her, he encounters Ada Wong, a woman who helped him in Raccoon City.
Right.
Ada is attempting to obtain a sample of Las Plagas to take back to her employer.
I'd like to take a moment to point out how dumb Ada Wong's name is. And it continues to be dumb decades after I first heard it in the late 90s.
Yeah.
It's still hilarious, but it's really dumb.
Leon eventually finds Ashley again, and Luis shows up with some medicine that will slow the growth of the Plagas inside them, as well as a sample of Las Plagas to turn over to the U.S. government. Sadler shows up and kills Luis and takes the sample. Eventually, Leon faces Sadler and, in traditional Resident Evil fashion, kills him with a rocket launcher.
Right.
Because that's not
That's how you do it.
way too much.
No, that's normal.
Ada Wong steals the Plagas sampler. And it sounds like something you'd order at Applebee's. I'll take the Plagas sampler, please. Yeah, can I get one of those in a margarita? Thanks.
I bet Applebee's actually does sell it though. It
And
seems
Leon
like
and
something they'd have
Ashley
on their menu.
escape on a jet ski
Yeah, like you
in
do.
an obvious homage to Metal Gear Solid. It's the only reasonable explanation.
And we skipped over some things, but they're not. They don't affect the plot in a meaningful way.
So I will go ahead and say I have not played Resident Evils 1 through 3 or Code Veronica.
Okay.
And this story is, again, some Metal Gear Solid level ridiculous bullshit.
Okay. Yeah.
And I just assumed that all Resident Evil games were Metal Gear Solid level ridiculous bullshit.
Kinda.
With non sequiturs and plot lines that go nowhere and seem to misunderstand their own previous story beats.
Well, not as much. So it happens, but not as much as Metal Gear.
Okay.
In previous Resident Evil games,
Metal Gear is kind of the gold
Yeah.
standard for nonsensical
Right.
plots.
previous Resident Evils at least tried to be internally consistent. Like there were
Right.
zombies, but everyone thought that was weird. So everything outside of the zombies was assumed to be normal reality.
Mhm.
And then Resident Evil 4 shows up and they've got a single secret agent going to Europe to save the president's daughter from parasites. So
Right.
there's a lot of logical leaps that were taken between Code
What
Veronica
was the
and
president's
4.
daughter doing alone in rural Spain to begin with?
Or was she brought there? And if she was, how did they learn it was there?
I have so many questions.
There's more questions than answers here.
So to just kind of give a brief rundown of all the characters, you've got Leon, who's our hero, Ashley Graham, who is our very annoying damsel in distress, Luis, who's just listed in our notes as researcher and sexist.
Yes, correct.
That's his title.
Yeah, that's him.
You have Ingrid, who is the person that you contact all the time. You call her on these like Metal Gear Solid. I'm really wanting to compare this to Metal Gear Solid. These not codec calls,
Right.
radio calls.
And she's the one who assures you that there's another helicopter coming after the first one was taken down.
Right, and her interactions are what highlight how dumb all of them are,
Yes.
more than anyone else to me.
Right?
Because it's like at one point, whenever Leon is unconscious getting injected with the plagas, he calls her afterward and she's like, yeah, they called in 6 hours. And I'm like, aren't you tracking him? Can't
Right?
you call him? Why don't you send
Yeah.
a team? What do you think is
Seriously,
happening?
where was
Like,
backup? It's 6 hours.
Ada Wong is there. You have Ramon Salazar, who's a very short, crazy person.
Correct.
And he governs the region.
Yes.
And he's one of Sadler's followers, and he's just kind of one of the creepier characters.
Yeah, he is weird.
You have Vitores Mendez, who's a former Catholic priest and village elder, very tall with a fake eye, wears a trench coat, turns into a scorpion man.
Yeah, it looks like Rasputin.
Yeah, very
He's
Rasputin.
Spanish Rasputin.
Yeah. That would be his wrestling name. You have Jack Krauser, who's a former U.S. Army soldier who was hired by Albert Wesker to infiltrate Los Illuminados and take a Las Plagas sample. He has a grudge against Leon, who he believed killed.
Leon
was
believed
killed in a previous.
Krauser was killed in a previous mission.
Oh, pardon me. You have Osmond Sadler, who is the leader of Los Illuminados. You have Wesker there again, the former head of STARS.
Yeah.
Who you might know.
Who is the bad
does
guy
bad
in
things.
all the early Resident Evils, pretty much. Spoiler for Resident Evil 1, by the way.
And Los Ganados, which translates literally to the herd or the mob or the cattle, and refers to the infected villagers that are not zombies.
Totally not
They
zombies.
are definitely, don't use the Z word. They're not. Yeah. They're They're Los Ganados.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
what they are.
Definitely that.
So I think we've established that the story is nonsensical.
It's pretty fucking so crazy, yeah.
And on top of that, because I've always heard that the earlier Resident Evils have this kind of B-movie charm where the characters are dumb and goofy, but dumb and goofy in a way that is charming.
Yeah. And also the voice acting in the early games ranges between hilariously bad and goofy charming bad.
The characters in this one are more like that kind of A- tier movie where it's not so bad it's good, but it's also not good enough to be good.
Yeah, it feels like an early Steven Seagal movie as far as acting goes.
The characters are just stiff or annoying. Those are the two.
Right.
You've got Leon, who's basically a piece of cardboard, and you've got Ashley, who's just flopping around all over the place.
Yeah, and then you have Ada, who is also stiff and annoying somehow.
Yeah, she's the middle of the Venn diagram. But surely, Saturn, surely the gameplay saves Resident Evil 4, because I feel like we've been down on the game so far, and again, the game was very critically acclaimed.
Oh, yeah. I would like to take a moment to note that the gameplay specifically is highly acclaimed.
Yes.
Yes.
Most definitely. I don't know anyone that's like, oh man, the story in Resident Evil 4 is... I don't know anyone that says that.
Yeah, no.
But it moved from a fixed camera angle to an over-the-shoulder view,
Right.
Which led to more accurate aiming.
Right.
It also led to more difficult aiming.
Yeah, because before you had auto-lock aiming, where as long as you were pointed at an enemy, you would hit it. And if you tilted up slightly, you'd hit the head. Like, you didn't have to aim for the head. You couldn't do that from the previous camera angle. So now you have to aim for it in order to be able to hit it. So there is some more precision involved.
And I again, not having only played bits of the earlier ones, it definitely adds to the tension, I feel, because you're being forced to aim more specifically,
Right.
I guess.
That's fair.
it's I feel like it's easier to mess up the aiming.
Yeah,
I guess
I definitely mess
is
up
my
aiming a lot
interpretation.
more in this than in the old ones.
And when you have a bunch of villagers bearing down on you, it can add to the stress and the tension
yeah.
for sure.
Definitely.
What I didn't like was that it wasn't just like straight third person shooter style. You had to stop to aim.
Well, that's traditional Resident Evil at this point. Like
Right.
all the
but
games
that's
prior,
not-
you stopped to aim, so that was just carried
Right.
over. I get that is a poor mechanic by today's standards, but
Right.
over-the-shoulder shooters weren't super common then, so nobody knew
No.
exactly how to handle that. So they were like, "Well, it's just how Resident Evil is." So that makes sense. It would keep doing that.
I feel like paired with the over-the-shoulder aiming that necessitates accuracy,
Right.
it feels. I don't know that I love it, and I don't know, and I liked it at the time, and I don't know if it's that I've played third-person shooters since then,
Right.
and especially since like Gears of War really kind of
Yeah.
reinvigorated
Well,
the third-person
Even
shooter
Resident Evil
genre.
5 and 6 allowed you to move and shoot, if I remember.
Right, you felt much more in control.
Yeah.
I didn't play 6, but I played Resident Evil
Don't
5.
play
Yeah,
6.
you definitely felt much more in control
Mhm.
in that one. They removed ink ribbons, and typewriters can now be used as much as you want, which is, well, that's great for me.
Yeah.
I cannot stand games with limited saves.
Right.
It is very frustrating to me. I understand why they did it in the earlier
Yeah.
games. I don't personally like it.
Now, the old games always had limited saves, and it was always a stress-inducing mechanic, and you would constantly be worried about running out of ink ribbons. That said, I've never finished a Resident Evil game with less than 15 ink ribbons on me.
And then the next one, they introduced quick time events to the series, which are used in cutscenes, boss fights, even regular encounters. They honestly kind of crop up
Everywhere.
all the time. And they seem to have done it in such a way that you do not know they're coming, and you
No.
are not supposed to know they are coming.
Right.
And I wanna right here, right now, say at the time,
Mhm.
it was not universally,
Right.
but very popular and critically loved. People liked the QTEs.
Yeah, it was a new thing. It made the game feel more cinematic.
right.
And QTEs hadn't already overstayed their welcome yet. I don't think this was the first game to have them, but it was an earlier
No.
important game to have them.
It was at the time people were excited because it was a way to, hey, it's still a video game, you're still
Right.
interacting, but it gets to have its cinematic moment.
Right.
And I feel like QTEs are really frowned upon now,
Yeah.
and they've very much fallen out of favor. But at the time, Resident Evil 4 QTEs, people loved it. They're like, "This is great. These are awesome. I get to like play the cutscenes.
I can
How cool."
suplex this enemy for no fucking reason.
We really didn't even talk about the fact that Leon S. Kennedy
Yeah.
Esquire is apparently like Hulk Hogan.
Yeah,
The guy.
he definitely took a lesson in badass between RE2 and RE4. I don't know what
Oh,
school he
man.
went to, but now
Right.
he can roundhouse kick fucking anyone and suplex a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't know how he roundhouses anything in those pants. I mean, they've got to be restrictive,
Right.
right?
Yeah, you'd think, but
But I do want to say, and I think this is, we're kind of getting to the root of, with the gameplay, portions of why I loved it so much at the time, and I don't love it now, which is that QTEs were fresh and exciting then. Now they're boring now.
Yeah.
They're frustrating now.
right.
Because we found better ways for you to interact with cinematic moments
Right.
in games since then.
Yeah.
I'm not in love with the aiming
Yeah.
and the way that works. And then the game has a huge escort section
Right.
with Ashley.
Multiple escort sections.
When you save Ashley, she's just with you, following you around all the time. You can tell her to follow or wait, and there are sometimes hiding spots that she can hide in.
Get in this garbage dumpster.
Yeah, come here, President's daughter. Climb in this dumpster while I murder all these Spanish
Okay,
villagers.
actually, I want to take a moment to talk about the very first scene in the game. So you walk into some random dude's house without knocking
No knocking.
in a
Yep.
foreign country, and you
Yep.
don't speak their language. You
He
speak
does
to
not
them
speak Spanish.
in English, expecting
Yep.
him to answer. He turns around and gets angry at this person who has walked into his house and started speaking a foreign language at him. So you shoot
Right.
him in the head.
Yeah, you kill him.
That's how the game starts. That's what our hero does.
I gotta say, Leon's character doesn't play well in 2020.
No, not at all.
I'm just gonna throw it out there. He plays very badly in
Right.
2020. So yeah, Super Soldier Ninja Leon S. Kennedy saves Ashley Graham,
Yeah.
and she's with you, and she's annoying, and it's like every time I turn around with my shotgun, I'm pointing it right at her, and I'm like, "Move, Ashley, move!"
And you can shoot her. You can.
Oh
you
yeah,
can stab
yes,
her
you
too.
can.
At the time when this came out, escort missions weren't super common, and the ones that were there were really poorly executed. So
Yeah.
even this part of the game was praised at release, and it was praised for how much ability you had to command Ashley, how you could tell her to wait, or you could tell her
Which,
to
granted, it was stand there, come with me, get in this dumpster.
Right.
Those were your
That was
three
your
command
three
options.
was stand, follow, dumpster. That's it.
And then the inventory system was revamped, and it is now basically an organizational Tetris-y style puzzle that a large part of the game is you managing your inventory, and it is that way on purpose.
Yeah.
And this is another thing that played very well when the game came out.
It did give it a huge inventory compared to the older games.
Yeah, in this whole inventory thing, I don't remember anyone that was like, "Oh, I can't stand the puzzly inventory." Everyone's like, "I kind of like it. It's like a weird little mini game. It's fun." And it just doesn't play now, weird restrictive inventory, huge amounts of QTEs and escort missions.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird to think that in 2005, it was like, oh yeah, this is amazing.
Well, it's very much a product of its time.
For sure. They did add the best part of the game, which is the merchant.
I forgot to put him in the characters, I realize now.
Yeah. Which, do we ever really find anything out about him? It's just he's just a weird dude that's just like
he's just,
got all these machine guns.
He's got some good things on sale, stranger.
And I don't know if they had this in earlier games. I don't feel like they did, but there was a hefty upgrade system for all of the weapons.
Well, there was occasional upgrades in the older games. Like sometimes you'd find like a stock for a weapon or a sight for a weapon or something like that.
But in this one, you're like paying money to upgrade them across multiple vectors, like firepower, firing speed,
all that kind
of capacity.
Stuff. Yeah. That was all new.
And that is, I will give it that much. That's still really fun today. It feels like this kind of weird like gun RPG that you're playing.
Leveling up your weapons. And,
you're playing a gun-based SRPG where you have to fit them all in your attaché case and upgrade them all along the way.
Yeah, the first time that I played through the game, we would, every time we would find a typewriter, we would just go gung-ho until we could find the next one and use all the ammo we could, and then we would not save, and we would reload from the last one. And then we would, knowing what all was coming, we would pace ourselves and get directly to the next one. And anytime we saw a merchant, we would go back to that last save and make sure to completely exhaust all the ammo in one of our weapons so that we could upgrade its capacity, because that also fills all of its ammo. So we would cheat and get extra ammo, especially for shotguns that way. And we felt like we were so fucking smart, though I'm sure the game absolutely expects you to do that.
Right. So it's the action-y elements of the game, I feel they're still pretty well done. They hold up okay.
Yeah.
But it's some of the very 2005-esque design choices that I feel that they're not bad today. They're just not as good as they felt at the time.
Right. Yep.
And then finally, there are multiple difficulty settings. I don't believe the GameCube one had difficulty that you could set, but I think all the later ports had it.
I believe on GameCube you could unlock the professional setting.
Okay, so I can make it harder, but not easier.
Whereas everything after that had an easy mode and a normal mode.
Yeah, and the game also allegedly has adaptive difficulty that changes damage, aggressiveness, and item spawns based on the player's ability, but it never adapted low enough for me.
Yeah, you have to die a lot and keep continuing in order for it to adapt. If you go back to an old save file instead of continuing, it doesn't adapt.
Yeah. So gameplay out of the way. Again, it is a weird mixture of stuff. It's a very 2005 feeling game.
Right.
Very much.
Yeah.
It's funny that
it might be the game that inspired the 2005 game feeling.
Very possibly. Yeah. And it's funny that one of the early versions turned into Devil May Cry, because I feel the same about the early Devil May Cry games. They're very much
early 2000s
games.
Yeah.
You feel that when you play them.
Right.
Tell me about the presentation.
So
RE4.
You no longer have the fixed camera angles. So now it's got fully 3D rendered environments for the first time in the main series anyway. Almost all of the FMVs are rendered in real time on a GameCube anyway. The PS2 used recorded footage of the GameCube version for all the FMVs. which
Mhm.
was weird. But most ports now, anyways, just render it in real time, which is nice.
Yeah.
The game was presented in 16:9 widescreen, which was huge at the time because no games were in widescreen in
Mhm.
2005. However, because of that, it's letterboxed on the GameCube, and there's no way to stretch it out to a 16:9 screen.
It's letter and pillar boxed.
Well, depending on what system you're playing on. If you're playing on a proper GameCube, it's just letterboxed, and you just have to stretch your screen correctly.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're playing it on a Wii, it is both letter and pillar boxed.
Yes.
Because-
I'm aware.
Yeah. And since the PS2 version, it's had anamorphic, so then you could just play it natively on
Right.
whatever screen you want. And of course, I do have to mention that Newbie Tech released the chainsaw controller for both GameCube and PS2 alongside the release of the game. It's really neat looking. It's ridiculous, and it's not fun to play with. It's hard to hold.
I've not checked on it, but I'm sure it's expensive now.
It is. It's like $200.
I will
last
say-
I checked.
Fucking nobody bought that thing.
No.
I started work at GameStop in would have been 2006, I think, right around this time.
Yeah.
And we finally just put those things not even on a shelf, on top of the cabinets over the counter.
Right.
Because fucking nobody wanted them until eventually
They went on
they
clearance.
just pennied out and went back to corporate or got thrown in the dumpster. We didn't even want to take them home. Nobody wanted them.
Yeah, they're pretty expensive now. Last I checked, they're around $200.
Do not pay $200.
Yeah.
No one out there
pay
don't
a
do
dime
it.
for it. It's not a good controller.
It's a piece of crap.
As a piece of Resident Evil collectible merchandise, it's neat. It's worth it for that, but not worth $200.
Yeah. Let's talk legacy. Well, first legacy within the RE series, and then general.
So this
legacy.
is where you would have seen all this pushback. So you had mentioned that
Yeah.
this was a surprise to you that there was so much pushback against the game.
Correct.
If you were invested in the horror community or the Resident Evil community, you would know that this is a very divisive game.
Mhm.
This was the shift towards action-heavy games in the series, leaving behind a lot of the tension and the horror that you saw in the earlier games, and a lot of people blame it for that. A lot of people blame RE4 for what became RE5 and 6. That said, it was the highest-selling game in the series at the time, a record that would later be beaten by Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. So, for old fans of the series and fans of horror games in general, it is seen as the
decline.
right. But as far as the sales numbers go, it was the beginning of the steep ascent. So it is.
This is when Resident Evil hit the mainstream.
Oh, yeah.
Basically.
It was also shortly after the movie came out, if I remember right.
Metacritic score, and I assume these are recorded as of time of this show's recording,
Yes.
on GameCube is a 96% with
Yes.
82 reviews. PS2 is also a 96 with 38 reviews.
Right.
That is a tremendously high Metacritic score.
Yes.
This was a massive game.
Oh, yeah.
This was massively popular, massively beloved.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone had it. Everyone played it, and it helped. That it was on everything. ever.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
And also it really did start a lot of those tropes of the mid 2000s. You didn't see a ton of over the shoulder shooting games before Resident Evil 4, and then everything was over the shoulder shooting game. It was one of the earliest brown and gray games, like somebody mentioned in the listener feedback.
Mhm.
It was one of the earliest games that put a shit ton of QTEs in the middle of everything. So it was definitely a trend setter.
And it is kind of a strange one because Resident Evil 5 and 6 beat it in sales, but were not critically beloved.
No.
This seems to have, for some reason, been some sort. I mean, granted, Resident Evil 7 is a different story altogether, but 5 and 6, I feel, are very much Resident Evil 4 parts 2 and 3 as far as like gameplay and design.
Yeah, between critics and fans of the series, 5 and 6 are the least beloved. But as far as sales figures go, it just kept going up.
Yeah. So as far as final thoughts, Resident Evil 4 is a hard one because I do think it's a good game.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that maybe I was playing games so heavily in the 2005 forward era that I'm just kind of not ready to go back to where a lot of the tropes of the aughts and 2010s started.
Right.
You know, I don't think it's a bad game, and it's weird because we decided to do this game. And I was like, heck yeah, Resident Evil 4, it's a fun game. It's be a great, nice, positive episode. And I just feel like it's been us like, yeah, I don't know if it's as good as we felt like it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I did go back and replay it for this, and I didn't finish it yet, but I am at the last chapter now, so I'm probably going to finally finish it again for the first time in 15 years. And and I am enjoying it a little more than I expected to, but I also had my hopes way down because of all the times that I have failed to get anywhere in it. The most recent port, which is what I'm playing, I was trying it on Xbox One and on Steam, does clean up some things, and I give it credit for that. On Xbox One especially, they changed the controls a bit to be a little more in line with more modern games of that style. But still, it is definitely a 15-year-old game, no matter how much they polish it up.
Yeah. So it's as far as legacy, its legacy is massive, not even just within the Resident Evil franchise, but within gaming in general in the mid 2000s. But as far as should you play it today, I kind of feel like yes, because it's still a decent game and it's on everything. I just feel like in my head, I had hyped it up too much. You know, I went into it expecting too much. And when I got there, I was like, oh, a lot of things have done this better since then.
Right.
And I did not realize how influential this was from a design perspective.
Yeah, I would, if you're going to replay it today, I would say play the most modern port.
Right. I played the original GameCube version on a GameCube.
Yeah.
I would go newer than that. Anyway, that's our show. And we didn't discuss this, but or do we want to do these thank yous back and forth?
Yeah, why
popcorn
not?
Style?
Let's do that.
So, as always, you can support the show by going to patreon.com/Retro Warriors. And this particular episode was brought to you in part by David Martin,
Leo Lobato,
Norman,
Cajun Boz,
Wing Commander episode, please.
Is that Andrew? Michael Hawes.
I hate bad dudes.
About time.
Well, how do I always get that one too?
Metroidvania is a genre. I hope Justin reads this. I'm sorry. Not this time.
It is not. We decided they're called Castleroids.
No, you decided that.
They're called Castleroids.
I'll keep calling them Metroidvanias.
Show is also brought to you by Tiger Driver.
And Blue Eyes, attack with all your Venus, White Lightning.
So I'd like to inform you that that's a Yu-Gi-Oh reference.
Oh, what's that?
Yeah, I didn't think you'd get that one. It's like the Pokemans, but it's about an ancient Egyptian spirit that plays a card game that inhabits a young boy.
Okay, I knew that Yu-Gi-Oh was a children's franchise. I did not know any of what you just said there. Is that real, or are you making that up?
Yeah, no, really? Okay, so, all right. Tangent.
We can talk about it on the pre-show next time.
Okay, we'll do that. Anyway, thank you so much to all of our patrons. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We would love it if you rated and reviewed us on your podcast aggregator of choice.
Indeed.
And we will be back next week with more things. As always, thank you for listening, and let us cling together.